Hi guys, tonight we're following the first quiet shimmer of gold. Not in a palace, not in a crown, but in cold river water sliding over your fingers. Imagine kneeling beside an ancient stream at dusk, while insects hum in the reeds and the wet stones press softly into your knees. Somewhere nearby, smoke rises from a small fire, carrying the smell of charred wood and cooked grain. In your pass, among dark sand and tiny pebbles, one bright speck refuses to behave like the rest of the world. It does not rust, it does not dull, it simply glows, as if it has remembered the sun. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what your local time is, because somewhere, someone is listening under midnight clouds while someone else hears this in the soft gold of morning. Now, dim the lights, and you are beside the river, long before coins, banks, royal vaults, or museum glass, watching human wonder begin with a handful of shining dust. You scoop again, slowly, because there is no hurry here. The water is cool enough to make your fingertips ache. It slips around your wrist with a whisper carrying silt, leaves, and the faint mineral smell of mud stirred from the riverbed. You are not looking for wealth yet. Not exactly. Wealth is still a young idea, still waiting for kings to give it rules and priests to give it meaning. You are looking because the shine has caught you. It is strange, this little yellow thing. It does not look like bone, shell, flint, or copper ore. It does not need fire to reveal its beauty. It arrives already finished. Long before anyone writes down a treaty or carves the name of a ruler into stone, people notice gold in stream beds and alluvial sands. That is one of the gentle miracles of the metal. It can be found almost pure, loosened from rock by weather, carried by rivers, and gathered as flakes or nuggets by patient hands. You do not need a vast furnace to understand its charm. You need a bowl, a stream, and a mind willing to be distracted by brightness. Very inconvenient, really, for anyone hoping early humans would remain practical and sensible. You roll a tiny piece between your fingers. It is heavy for its size, softly warm once it leaves the water, and oddly obedient. When pressed, it bends. When hammered with a smooth stone, it spreads into a thin glowing sheet instead of shattering. This matters. Gold is not just beautiful, it is workable. Its softness invites touch, shaping, experiment. You can imagine an early craftsperson crouched near a hearth, tapping a bead of gold flatter and flatter while sparks rise into the evening air. The sound is delicate, a faint clicking against stone. Almost too small for history to notice. And yet history notices. In some of the earliest known ornaments, gold appears not as money, but as adornment. It hangs close to the body, threaded into beads, folded into thin pieces, worn by people who may not have thought of themselves as rich in the later sense. They may have thought of themselves as protected, beautiful, marked, connected to something bright and enduring. A mainstream historical fact is simple and important here. Some of the world's oldest worked gold objects were found in the Varna Cemetery near the Black Sea, in what is now Bulgaria, dating to the 5th millennium BCE. There, gold was placed in graves in astonishing quantities. Long before the pyramids rose in Egypt, you stand in imagination at the edge of that burial ground, where the air smells of dry earth and salt wind, and you realize that gold has already become more than decoration. It is now part of memory. The graves are silent, of course, but they are not empty of meaning. Some people were buried with very little. Others were laid to rest with golden ornaments, tools, and symbols. The difference speaks softly, but firmly. Something has shifted. A society is beginning to show rank, status, and perhaps sacred authority through objects that cannot be eaten, planted, or used to cut wood. Gold does no work in the field. Gold does not pull a cart. Gold just sits there glowing, which, to be fair, has been a surprisingly successful career path. You feel the atmosphere changing as you move from riverbank to settlement. The ground under your bare feet becomes packed clay. Dogs bark somewhere in the distance. A child laughs, then goes quiet as elders gather around a newly shaped piece of gold. Smoke clings to wool, hides, and woven fibres. Someone holds the ornament up in the low sun, and everyone sees the same impossible colour. It resembles fire, but it does not burn. It resembles sunlight, but it can be held. That is the emotional doorway through which gold enters power. The earliest kings do not need gold because it is practical. They need it because it persuades. A leader wrapped in ordinary cloth is still a leader. Perhaps. But a leader wearing shining metal seems touched by something beyond the everyday. In a world where authority must be seen, gold becomes a visible argument. You do not need to read a law code to understand who matters when one body in the crowd catches the light. And this is where the story becomes social. Gold helps communities perform difference. It marks the bride, the warrior, the priest, the ruler, the ancestor. It appears at ceremonies where voices lower and drums thud against the evening. You hear the rhythm through your ribs. You smell animal fat in the lamps, damp clay walls, crushed herbs, and the sour sweetness of fermenting drink. A gold ornament flashes every time someone moves their hand. The metal is small, but the attention around it is large. Historians still argue whether early gold objects mainly represented personal wealth, religious meaning, inherited rank, or some mixture that changed from place to place. This uncertainty is worth keeping close, like a smooth stone in your palm. It prevents the past from becoming too tidy. People rarely use precious things for only one reason. A bead can be beautiful, sacred, political, and sentimental all at once. Anyone who has ever kept a useless little object because it reminds them of someone knows this perfectly well. Now you follow gold into lands where rivers are more than scenery. Along the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Indus, and many smaller waterways. Human communities learn that water is movement, food, boundary, and road. Gold rides these networks quietly. It passes from hand to hand, from mountain stream to village, from village to workshop, from workshop to grave or shrine. It does not travel alone. With it move shells, obsidian, copper, lapis lazuli, amber, ivory, and stories. Trade is not yet the bright marketplace of later imagination. Often it is slower, more personal, more tangled with marriage ties, seasonal gatherings, tribute, and gift exchange. You walk into a room where gold is being shaped. The air is close and smoky. The floor is gritty beneath your soles. A craftsperson sits near a low flame, not melting great bars like a fantasy king's treasury, but working tiny amounts with care. Thin gold can be beaten, folded, pierced, wrapped around wood or bone, and shaped into beads. The tools are humble. The patience is immense. Each tap carries the soft discipline of someone who knows the material's moods. Too hard, and the piece may tear. Too little, and it refuses the intended form. The metal may be obedient, but it still has opinions. Very shiny opinions. A quirky tidbit, almost too charming to be real, is that gold can be hammered so thin that a small amount spreads across a surprisingly wide surface. Later artisans would create gold leaf delicate enough to tremble with a breath, but the basic wonder begins early. You can take this dense, heavy metal and coax it into something almost weightless, like sunlight pretending to be cloth. Imagine the first person who discovered that. There must have been a pause, a little gasp perhaps, followed by the ancient equivalent of, well, now everyone is going to want this. Gold's refusal to tarnish deepens the spell. Copper changes, iron rusts, silver darkens, organic materials decay. But gold seems to resist time, to people watching bodies age, food spoil, wood rot, and houses collapse back into earth. This permanence feels extraordinary. Place gold with the dead, and it remains when flesh and fabric fade. Offer gold to a deity, and it keeps shining through smoke, dust, and generations of hands. We're gold in life, and it suggests that something about you, your family, your office, or your spirit reaches beyond ordinary change. This is not greed yet, at least not in the simple cartoon sense. It is wonder becoming structure. It is beauty becoming hierarchy. It is rarity becoming message. Gold is scarce enough to matter, visible enough to impress, durable enough to remember, and soft enough to transform. Those qualities form a quiet alliance. Together, they make the metal unusually suited for ceremony and command. You stand now near a small early ruler, perhaps not a king in the later monumental sense, but as chief, a high-status elder, someone whose presence organizes the room. Around this figure, people bring offerings, grain in baskets, animal skins, polished stones, a few pieces of gold. The gold does not feed the storehouse, yet the room changes when it appears. Faces tilt toward it, voices soften. The gift is not large, but it carries condensed attention. It says, "I give you something rare." It says, "Your role deserves brightness." It says, "Remember me." Slowly, the metal teaches people how to imagine power as something that can be stored. A harvest must be eaten or guarded from pests. Cattle can die. Cloth wears out. But gold waits. It can be hidden, displayed, divided, melted, reshaped, buried, recovered. It is patient in a way most wealth is not. That patience gives rulers a new tool. Gold can gather loyalty through gifts. It can honor allies. It can decorate weapons without improving them, which is very on brand for politics. It can make a throne, a staff, or a headdress feel less like an object and more like a statement. In early Mesopotamia and neighboring regions, gold appears in elite burials, temple contexts, and luxury objects, often combined with other precious materials. You sense an expanding world, one where cities begin to breathe with administrative life. Clay tablets dry in the sun, scribes press marks into wet surfaces, donkeys bray in courtyards, merchants count goods, priests tend sacred spaces. Gold enters these systems not as loose river magic alone, but as something tracked, offered, exchanged, and guarded. The smell of the past here is dust, reeds, bitumen, sweat, and incense. The sound is sandals on packed earth, water jars knocking against hips, and the murmur of people learning how to live in larger numbers than memory comfortably holds. Still, even as systems grow, the river never disappears. You can return in your mind to that first crouch posture, hands in water, eyes searching the silt. The empire is hidden inside the flake, not because the flake commands armies by itself, but because humans are meaning-making creatures. We see brightness and decide it matters. We see permanence and connect it to gods. We see rarity and attach it to rank. We see beauty and, with impressive consistency, start organizing trouble around it. But tonight the trouble is still distant. For now, gold is a quiet discovery moving through early societies like a warm thread. It lies against skin as beads. It rests in graves as memory. It shines in ceremonies as authority. It travels along rivers and paths, passing through hands that are rough from work and eyes that are wide with the old human weakness for wonder. The stream keeps speaking in the dark. Its small sounds fill the spaces between thought. Somewhere, a person lifts a finished ornament and watches firelight ripple across it. Somewhere else, a ruler receives a golden token and understands, perhaps without words, that brightness can gather obedience. You feel the cool mud on your knees again, the smooth weight in your palm, the hush of people leaning closer. Gold has not yet built the great empires. It has done something quieter and more dangerous. It has taught human beings to believe that power can shine. You stand beneath an Egyptian sun so bright it seems to press its hand against the whole valley. The air trembles above the fields. Mud brick walls hold the day's heat. The Nile moves with a slow, greenish shine, carrying reeds, boats, fish, silt, and the soft slap of water against wooden hulls. Somewhere, cattle low in the distance. Somewhere closer, a worker laughs, then coughs through dust. The smell is thick and layered river mud, cut papyrus in a sweat, baked clay, crushed herbs, and the faint sweetness of dates drying in baskets. Against all this earth-coloured life, gold appears like a piece of the sun that has agreed, very politely, to be owned by humans. In Egypt, gold is not merely pretty, it is cosmic. It belongs to the world of gods, kings, temples, and eternity. You feel this immediately when you enter a sacred courtyard and see polished surfaces catch the light. Stone columns rise like papyrus stalks. Linen robes whisper around ankles. Priests move with careful steps, smelling of incense, oil, and clean water. Every gesture seems slower than ordinary movement, as though the air itself has rules here. Gold glints on ritual objects, on amulets, on collars, on divine images hidden from most eyes. It does not behave like decoration. It behaves like proof. A central Egyptian idea gave gold extraordinary power. It was associated with the flesh of the gods, the sun god Ra, radiant and life-giving, made gold feel less like a mineral and more like a divine substance. Kingship in Egypt leaned heavily on this brightness. The pharaoh was not simply a political boss with excellent jewellery, although that certainly helped the branding. He was presented as a sacred ruler, linked to divine order, responsible for maintaining Ma'at, the balance that kept the universe from becoming a dusty argument. Gold helped make that claim visible. When the ruler shone, the cosmos seemed to shine with him. You walk into a workshop near a royal or temple complex. The room is dimmer than the open street, but points of light flicker everywhere. Artisans bend over benches, their fingers steady from long practice. You hear the soft rasp of tools, the tapping of hammers, the creak of a stool, the hiss of a small furnace fed with air. Heat touches your face. The floor is gritty beneath your feet. A young apprentice holds a piece of charcoal. Watching an older goldsmith shape a thin sheet around a wooden core. The metal bends without complaint, catching flamelight in ripples. The smell of heated metal mixes with ash, resin, and human concentration. Egyptian goldsmiths were remarkably skilled. They hammered, cast, soldered, inlaid, and combined gold with stones such as carnelian turquoise and lapis lazuli. The colours were not chosen randomly. Blue could suggest the heavens or the Nile's fertile promise. Green might whisper of rebirth. Red could carry energy, heat, danger, or protection. Gold, glowing and untarnishing, gathered these meanings into one dazzling language. A collar was not just a collar. A pectoral was not just something impressive for the chest. These objects spoke in symbols, and apparently they spoke very loudly, because several thousand years later we are still leaning in to listen. A mainstream historical fact stands at the centre of this golden Egypt Nubia. To the south was one of Egypt's major sources of gold. The very name Nubia is often linked with gold in ancient thought and Egyptian expeditions, forts, and administrative systems reached into these southern regions to control the flow of precious metal. You can picture the desert routes, pale and harsh, where men and donkeys move under a white sky. Sand stings the cheeks. Water skins grow lighter with each stop. In rocky places, miners work in exhausting heat, following veins through stone. Their world is not the shining temple hall, not the calm museum case. It is sweat, grit, cramped tunnels, and the hard sound of tools striking stubborn earth. The contrast is almost dreamlike. In one place, a priest lifts a golden vessel before a god. In another, a miner wipes dust from his mouth and squints into darkness. Gold connects them, but it does not treat them equally. This is one of history's quieter truths. Luxury often arrives polished, while labour remains scratched and breathing heavily somewhere out of sight. You feel the weight of that as you pass from the temple to the desert edge, where the wind smells dry and mineral sharp. The sun lowers, but the stones still radiate heat through your sandals. Gold mining in ancient Egypt could be highly organised. Officials recorded labour, supplies, routes, and output. Expeditions moved into the eastern desert and Nubian regions, where quartz veins were crushed and washed to separate the precious particles. Imagine the noise pounding stone, shouted instructions, animals braying, wind worrying at tents, bowls scraping as material is washed. There is nothing sleepy about the work itself. It is repetitive, punishing, and exact. Yet in the story of gold, this harsh rhythm becomes hidden beneath the smoother music of royal ideology. Now you are in the presence of a pharaoh's image, not the living person exactly, but the official version of him, carved, painted, gilded, enlarged, and improved beyond anything a normal breakfast could support. His posture is calm, his face is serene. He wears regalia meant to tell you that order has a body. Gold brightens crowns, masks, shrines, and sacred furniture. It declares permanence in a land where the annual flood teaches everyone that life depends on cycles. The king must endure, the gods must be honoured, the dead must be prepared. Gold fits all of this because it seems almost insultingly resistant to decay. Egyptian burial practice gives gold one of its most famous stages. You enter a tomb space where the air feels cooler, close, and still. The walls are painted with fields, boats, servants, offerings, spells, and bright scenes of a life remade for eternity. Oil lamps tremble. Dust rests on carved edges. The smell is dry stone. Old plaster, resin, linen, and faint aromatic traces of preservation. For elite Egyptians, tombs were not simply final resting places. They were equipped environments for continued existence. Objects placed with the dead could serve, protect, identify, and transform. Gold amulets might be tucked among wrappings. Jewellery could protect the body and proclaim status. Coffins and masks could present the deceased in an idealized, divine form. The most famous example, of course, is the burial equipment of Tutankhamun, whose golden funerary mask became one of the most recognized objects from the ancient world. You stand in that imagined glow, and it is easy to understand why the mask captured modern attention. The face is calm, almost sleepy, which is a little unfair, because it has done more publicity work than most living monarchs. Blue glass, precious stones, and gold combine to create not a portrait in the simple sense, but a transformed being, royal and eternal. Here is a quirky tidbit for your pillow-softened historical collection. Egyptians sometimes used gold not only in grand royal objects but also in surprisingly small protective items, including tiny amulets shaped like flies. The golden fly could be awarded as a military honour, connected with persistence and perhaps courage in battle. Yes, the fly. That buzzing little creature that ruins picnics was, in certain Egyptian contexts, apparently worthy of prestigious golden symbolism. History has a way of looking majestic, then suddenly landing on your melon. Egyptologists still debate whether every golden funerary object should be read mainly as religious equipment, royal propaganda, personal treasure, or a carefully blended combination of all three. The uncertainty matters because Egyptian objects can dazzle us into overconfidence. Gold is so visually commanding that we may assume we understand it at once. But ancient meanings were layered. A single amulet might protect the body, signal rank, invoke a god, please a family, follow tradition, and display access to wealth. The object does not have to choose one role just because we enjoy tidy labels. You move now through a temple treasury. Not every room is open to every person. Some spaces are controlled, guarded, restricted by ritual and hierarchy. The air is cooler in the inner chambers. Stone holds shadows. Incense curls upward in pale strands. Offerings are stored, counted, dedicated, and sometimes reused in ways that were perfectly practical, even if wrapped in sacred language. Gold objects could be given to gods, held by temples, and used to project the generosity and legitimacy of rulers. A pharaoh who fills a temple with precious metal is not just being decorative. He is announcing that the gods favour him, that the land is abundant, that order is being maintained, and that anyone questioning this arrangement should perhaps admire the shiny wall and reconsider. The relationship between gold and power in Egypt is therefore both spiritual and administrative. Behind the glow are scribes, storehouses, labour systems, diplomatic gifts, mining operations, craftsmen, soldiers, priests, and officials who keep the machinery moving. You hear reed pens scratching. You hear seals pressed into clay. You hear sandals in corridors and the low murmur of men discussing inventories. Gold becomes a point where belief and bureaucracy meet. That may sound less romantic than moonlit temples, but it is wonderfully human. Even eternity, it turns out, requires paperwork. Egypt also used gold in diplomacy. Royal courts exchanged precious gifts with neighbouring powers. Gold could flatter, negotiate, impress, and bind relationships. To receive Egyptian gold was to receive a piece of Egypt's solar prestige. To send it was to perform abundance. In letters from the ancient Near East, foreign rulers sometimes seemed very aware that Egypt had remarkable access to gold. One can almost hear the polite diplomatic tone hiding a less elegant message, lovely friendship we have here. Naturally, it would be even lovelier with more gold. As evening settles over the Nile Valley, the harsh brightness softens. The river darkens to bronze. Frogs begin their small night music. A breeze lifts the edge of your linen, cooling the sweat at your neck. Across the water, a temple wall catches the last sunlight and glows for a few quiet breaths. You understand why this metal belongs so naturally to Egyptian imagination. In a land ruled by the sun's daily journey, gold looked like continuity made visible. It could sit in a tomb and promise transformation. It could gleam in a sanctuary and suggest divine presence. It could rest on the body of a king and persuade a crowd that order had not vanished into dust. You leave the temple court slowly, with a warm stone under your hand and incense still clinging to your hair. The night does not erase the gold. It only changes how it shines. In lamplight, the metal becomes softer, more secretive, less like noon, and more like memory. Egypt teaches gold to speak the language of eternity, and in that language, kings become sons, gods wear flesh of light, and the quiet dead are dressed for a dawn that never fully ends. You enter a market where gold has learned a new trick. It no longer waits quietly in a tomb, temple, or ruler's private chamber. It moves. It passes from one warm hand to another, hidden in purses, weighed on scales, tested between teeth, and watched by eyes that pretend not to be watching too closely. The morning air is busy with bargaining. Donkeys complain in rough, offended bursts. Bronze pans clatter against wooden tables. Bread steams under cloth. You smell olives, fish brine, wool, sweat, crushed herbs, and the dry dust kicked up by sandals. Somewhere, a merchant laughs with a softness that makes you immediately suspicious. It is a very old sound. In your palm rests a small lump of precious metal stamped with a mark. It is not perfectly round. It feels dense, cool, and slightly uneven against your skin. This early coin is not yet the smooth, modern disc you might imagine. It is closer to a small nugget that has been disciplined by authority. Someone powerful has told the world this piece has a value. You may trust it. Or at least, you may trust it more than the stranger smiling at you from across the stall, which is not a very high bar, but history often begins with modest improvements. One mainstream historical fact stands here: bright and practical, the kingdom of Lydia in western Anatolia is widely associated with the earliest coinage, made from electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, around the 7th century BCE. These coins often carried official marks, including lion imagery, turning metal into something more than measured weight. You can feel the change in the marketplace. Before coins, trade often depends on weighing metal, judging purity, swapping goods, extending credit, remembering favours, and arguing with impressive stamina. With coins, value becomes portable, recognisable, and faster to use. The argument does not vanish, of course. Humans would never surrender arguing that easily. But it becomes more organised. You move between stalls, hearing the rhythm of exchange. A buyer places coins onto a scale. A seller narrows his eyes. The tiny weights click like insects against the pan. A goat bleats near a basket of onions. A potter wipes clay from her forearm and leans closer to inspect a coin's stamp. Her fingertips are rough, her nails rimmed with earth. She wants to know whether the piece is reliable. Everyone does. Coinage works only when enough people believe the mark means something. A coin is metal. Yes, but it is also a promise made visible. That promise needs power behind it. A ruler's stamp tells people that the authority issuing the coin stands behind its value, its weight, and its purity. In practice, this trust could be tested constantly. Coins might be shaved, clipped, counterfeited, debased, hoarded, or refused. You can almost hear the sleepy voice of civilization sighing. We invented money, and immediately invented money problems. Gold has a way of attracting clever hands. Its beauty draws admiration, but its value draws schemes, and the line between trade and temptation is sometimes as thin as hammered leaf. You pass a money changer seated in the shade. His table is worn smooth from use. Little piles of metal rest before him. Electrum, silver, perhaps gold of different standards. His fingers move quickly, but not carelessly. He knows the colour of good metal, the sound of a dropped coin, the feel of proper weight. He has a touch like a musician. A lamp smokes beside him even in daylight, giving off a bitter smell. He lifts a piece, rubs it, listens as it lands, and names a value. You sense how specialised knowledge becomes power. In a world of moving coins, the person who understands metal can guide trade, or quietly profit from confusion. Such is humanity. Give us a scale, and someone will eventually learn to tilt it. Many historians still argue over whether early coinage spread mainly because rulers needed to pay soldiers, because markets needed easier exchange, because temples handled precious offerings, or because taxation became more efficient when value came in stamped pieces. The answer may not be one neat explanation. Coins are too useful in too many different ways. A king can pay troops with them. A trader can price goods with them. A tax collector can demand them. A temple can store them. A traveller can carry them across regions. Gold and silver, once stamped, become little ambassadors of authority, jingling softly in leather pouches. Now you walk toward Lydia's wealthy court, where the name Croesus gathers like warm light. Croesus, king of Lydia in the 6th century BCE, became famous in Greek tradition for extraordinary wealth. The phrase rich as Croesus survives, because people love remembering a wealthy man, especially when the remembering comes with a faint moral warning. Under Croesus, Lydia is associated with refining coinage into separate gold and silver issues, helping create a clearer bimetallic system. You hold one imagined coin and feel how much confidence it asks of the world. It is small enough to hide under your tongue, yet strong enough to pay a soldier, settle a debt, or tempt a thief. A quirky tidbit waits nearby. In the dusty corners of ancient economic life, some Greek stories claimed that the Spartans used awkward iron money to discourage luxury. Whether the details are neat or exaggerated, the idea is wonderfully grumpy. Imagine trying to buy a fancy cloak with a pile of heavy iron pieces that are inconvenient to carry and not especially glamorous. It is economic policy by annoyance. Gold, by contrast, is dangerously convenient. It holds value in little space. It shines. It seduces. No wonder moralists keep glaring at it from the edge of history. You continue into the Greek world, where coinage multiplies into city identities. Each polis stamps its character into metal. Athens places Athena and the owl on silver coins, linking money to civic pride and divine patronage. Other cities use turtles, horses, bees, seals, lions, and local symbols. Coins become pocket-sized announcements. This is who we are. This is what we value. This is whose authority you are touching. Gold appears less commonly in some Greek city coinages than silver, but its prestige remains immense, especially in royal and imperial contexts. You can hear coins spilling onto a table, a bright rain of authority and ambition. The marketplace grows wider in your mind. Ships creak in harbours, sailors shout through salt air, ropes groan against wooden posts, amphorae smell of wine, oil, and resin. Coinage helps strangers do business with less conversation, which is both efficient and a little sad, because conversation is where gossip lives. A stamped coin can cross language barriers. A trader may not understand your accent, your god, or your grandmother's opinion of foreigners, but he can recognize metal, weight, and a familiar mark. Gold and coinage help knit together distant regions, not by making everyone friendly, but by making exchange more manageable. Then you step into the vast shadow of Persia. The Achaemenid Empire rules over many peoples, roads, languages, and landscapes. Royal administration depends on tribute, officials, storehouses, and movement. Persian gold darics, associated especially with the image of the king as archer or warrior, become famous high-value coins. You feel one resting against your palm like concentrated command. The daric is not just useful in trade. It is imperial presence made small enough to travel. In dusty satrapal offices, in military camps, in the purses of mercenaries, gold carries the king's reach. Yet coinage does not erase older systems. Barter, weighed bullion, credit, gifts, and local arrangements continue beside coins. History rarely flips a clean switch. It layers new habits over old ones like blankets on a chilly night. In some places, coins circulate eagerly. In others, just people prefer weighed metal or traditional obligations. You walk through a village where a coin is admired but not needed for every exchange. A neighbour may lend grain. A family may trade labour. A temple may record debt. Gold money is powerful, but it does not instantly conquer every kitchen, field, or sheep pen. The emotional change matters as much as the economic one. Coins make wealth countable in a new way. They allow a person to imagine value as a stack, a purse, a hidden jar under the floor. You kneel in a dim room, pressing your fingers into packed earth near a wall. A clay pot is buried there, sealed and secret. Inside, coins rest in darkness. They smell of soil and old metal. Hoarding becomes a quiet human response to uncertainty. War may come, taxes may rise, crops may fail. A ruler may decide, scholars, with magnificent confidence that your property would look better as his property. Coins give fear a shape. Gold also changes desire. A beautiful object worn in public invites admiration, but coins invite calculation. How many for a horse? How many for a debt? how many to bribe a guard, hire a singer, buy grain, escape a city, marry well, betray badly. You hear the clink of possibility. It is not loud, but it can drown out conscience when held close enough to the ear. This is why ancient literature often treats gold as both blessing and danger. It supports trade, pays labour, rewards service, and honours achievement. It also feeds envy, greed, fraud, and conquest. The metal itself remains calm. People do all the trembling. As twilight falls over the market, lamps appear one by one. Their flames tremble in the evening wind. The day's smells deepen cooling bread, trampled herbs, animal hide, smoke, and the faint metallic scent left on your fingers. Merchants close boxes. A money changer ties his purse. A child finds a lost bronze piece near a stall and looks around with enormous innocence, which fools absolutely no one. Somewhere, a gold coin disappears into a sleeve. Somewhere else, another is placed honestly into a waiting hand. You hold your coin a little longer. Its stamped face is worn at the edges by travel. It has passed through arguments, prayers, bargains, wages, taxes, and secrets. It has made strangers trust one another just enough to trade. It has made rulers visible far from their courts. It has taught people to measure value quickly and to hide value carefully. In the hush between closing stalls, gold is no longer only the glow of sacred power. It has become motion, trust, temptation, and choice, small enough to fit in your palm, heavy enough to bend the habits of the world. You wake into the sound of Rome at its most restless. Wheels grind over paving stones. Hooves strike hard against the street. Vendors call from shaded doorways with voices rough from dust and early wine. The air smells of olive oil, wet wool, smoke, fish sauce, baking bread, and humanity living a little too close together, because ancient cities were not designed by people who worried enough about ventilation. You feel the stone beneath your sandals, uneven and warm already, while sunlight slides down tall apartment blocks and catches on rings, bracelets, military decorations, and the polished edge of a magistrate's seal. Gold in Rome is not silent holiness alone. It is command, reward, appetite, and anxiety. It glows in temples, yes, but also in military pay, aristocratic display, imperial portraits, triumphal processions, and the tense little conversations that happen when taxes are due. The city breathes gold through every level of its ambition. It appears in the hand of a moneyer, in the strong box of a tax farmer, on the neck of a wealthy matron, and in the dream of a soldier standing on a cold frontier road, wondering whether glory might arrive in coin form. Ideally soon. You follow a crowd toward the forum, where political life hums beneath marble columns and painted statues. Robes brush your arm. Someone's perfume, thick with myrrh and rose, drifts past and vanishes into the sharper smell of sweat. A lawyer speaks too loudly nearby, because legal confidence has apparently sounded the same in every century. Men gather in clusters, arguing debts, elections, grain prices, inheritance, military news, and scandal. Above the noise, gold offers its quiet grammar. A signet ring presses authority into wax. A gilded statue catches public attention. A donor's name is linked to shining generosity. Wealth is not merely held, it is performed. A mainstream historical fact sits firmly in your palm. Rome issued gold coins called ori during the late Republic and Imperial period, and these coins became important high-value currency. The aureus was associated with state power, military finance, and imperial image. When you hold one, you feel its density first. It is small, but serious. On one side, an emperor's face may stare out with calm confidence, hair arranged as if even curls must obey government policy. On the other, a goddess, victory, peace, or military symbol promises that Rome is favoured, stable, and magnificently in charge. The coin is money, propaganda, and portable portrait all at once. You move toward a military camp beyond the city's polished heart. The air changes. It smells of leather, iron, horses, wood smoke, boiled grain, and damp earth packed by thousands of feet. Shields lean in rows, tents snap softly in the wind. You hear armour clink, dice rattle, men cough, mule drivers curse under their breath, and a centurion's voice cut cleanly through the morning. Gold matters here because empire is expensive. Roads, forts, fleets, soldiers, commanders, informants, and grain all require payment. Rome's greatness rests not simply on brave speeches or marble ideals, but on logistics. Very unromantic, perhaps, but extremely effective. Soldiers might be paid mostly in silver and other forms, depending on time and circumstance, yet gold occupied the upper reaches of imperial finance. Generals used precious metal to reward loyalty. Emperors used donatives, special payments to troops, to secure support. A ruler who forgot the army's expectations could discover that ideals are lovely, but armed men with overdue pay are more persuasive. You stand near a pay table and hear coins being counted. The sound is crisp, controlled, deeply emotional for everyone pretending to be calm. Fingers touch metal, eyes measure fairness. Trust in command can become very specific when it jingles. Rome's hunger for gold also leads you away from streets and camps into conquered landscapes. You travel in imagination to Hispania, where mines cut into hills and rivers are forced, diverted, and used to tear wealth from earth. The smell is colder there. Wet stone, mud, smoke, and crushed rock. Workers stand ankle-deep in slurry. Water roars through channels. Tools strike. Voices echo. One of Rome's most spectacular mining landscapes was Las Medulas in northwestern Spain, where Roman hydraulic mining reshaped entire hillsides in pursuit of gold. You gaze at red earth cliffs and feel how imperial desire can become geography. The method could be astonishing. Water stored in reservoirs and sent through channels helped break apart gold-bearing deposits. The force of it turned hills into wounds and valleys into work sites. The sound must have been tremendous, rushing water, collapsing earth. Shouted warnings, creaking wooden supports, stones grinding against stones. Rome did not merely find gold, it engineered landscapes to release it. The empire's glitter had mud under its nails. Here is one of the stranger tidbits that clings to Roman gold like dust to a sandal. Ancient writers told stories of gold digging ants in distant lands, creatures said to bring up gold, rich sand from underground. The tale appears in Greek and Roman traditions linked to regions beyond the familiar Mediterranean world. Modern explanations have suggested marmots or other burrowing animals may have inspired the legend. Whether animal, misunderstanding, traveller's exaggeration, or splendid ancient nonsense, the image is irresistible. Somewhere on the edge of empire, people imagined furry little miners accidentally contributing to the precious metals trade. Rome would probably have tried to tax them. You return to the capital during a triumph, the grand public celebration of conquest. The city is loud enough to vibrate in your chest. Trumpets blare. Crowds press shoulder to shoulder. Laurel leaves smell green and sharp in the heat. Incense burns. Captives, soldiers, painted boards, exotic animals, captured weapons, and heaps of treasure move through the streets in a carefully staged river of dominance. Gold here becomes theatre. It is carried in bowls, displayed on carts, worn by the victorious general, dedicated to the gods, and translated into a message every spectator understands. Rome has taken the wealth of others and made it part of itself. You feel the unease beneath the spectacle. The crowd cheers, but triumph is built from somebody else's loss. Golden cups and ornaments lifted from temples or royal treasuries do not arrive without stories attached. The Roman state often turned conquest into revenue through plunder, tribute, indemnities, taxation, and control of mines. The beautiful object shining under public sunlight may have come from a sanctuary, a palace, or a family storehouse far from Rome. Empire has excellent display lighting and terrible table manners. Within elite Roman houses, gold becomes intimate. You step into a dining room where couches are arranged around low tables, and lamps cast warm circles across painted walls. The smell of roasted meat, wine, herbs, and garum rises from platters. Guests recline in embroidered garments. Gold cups catch lamplight. Rings flash as hands gesture through gossip. A hostess wears jewellery that announces family status with calm ferocity. Roman moralists often complained about luxury, especially when it could be blamed on women, foreigners, or the decline of old values. This was convenient, since many of the men doing the complaining also enjoyed expensive things very much. Hypocrisy, unlike gold, requires no mining. Roman law and custom wrestled with luxury through sumptuary rules, social criticism, and public debate. The Oppian Law, passed during the Second Punic War, restricted women's display of wealth, including possession of gold beyond a small amount. When conditions changed, Roman women famously protested for its repeal, and the law was eventually abolished. You can almost hear the arguments spilling through the streets, sandals slapping stone, voices rising, fabric rustling, jewellery perhaps hidden or defiantly remembered. Gold becomes more than metal here. It becomes a question of status, gender, public morality, and who gets to shine. Experts continue to dispute how much Roman gold circulation directly drove inflation, how strongly debasement in other coinage affected daily life, and how ordinary people experience monetary instability across different provinces. The evidence is uneven. Coins survive in hoards, inscriptions, shipwrecks, and scattered finds. But they do not always explain themselves politely. A gold coin buried in a pot may represent savings, fear, tax avoidance, emergency, ritual, or simple forgetfulness by someone having a truly unfortunate day. The past leaves clues, not tidy financial spreadsheets. Then the imperial palace draws you inward. Marble floors feel cool through thin soles, curtains stir in a faint breeze. You smell polished wood, lamp oil, flowers, and the metallic tang of guarded wealth. Gold brightens ceilings, statues, vessels, furniture, and ceremonial dress. The emperor's image on coins spreads throughout the empire, reaching people who will never see his face in person. In a Syrian market, a British fort, an Egyptian tax office, or a Balkan village, the ruler appears in miniature. The coin says he is present. It says his authority travels faster than his body ever could. But gold also reveals insecurity. Emperors need it because loyalty must be maintained, borders defended, officials paid, rivals outshone, gods honoured, and subjects impressed. Every glittering ceremony tries to hide the same nervous truth power as expensive to keep. A golden crown may look eternal, but the accounts behind it are painfully mortal. Mines can decline, wars can drain treasuries, trade patterns can shift, soldiers can demand more, pretenders can mint their own claims. The calm face on the coin may mask a court full of whispers. At night, Rome softens but does not sleep. You walk past shuttered shops and glowing tavern, and somewhere a flute plays, thin and sweet. Dogs nose through refuse. Rainwater left in stone hollows cools the air. A gold ring on your finger has warmed to your skin, so close now that it feels almost natural. That is part of gold's power. It begins as something distant, sacred or imperial, then becomes personal, touching flesh, marking marriage, office, loyalty, vanity, ambition, and fear. Rome teaches gold the language of scale. It is no longer only a treasure to admire or a coin to exchange. It becomes an engine of conquest, a reward for armies, a badge of rank, a lever of diplomacy, a burden on minds, a temptation in homes, and a face of the emperor moving through millions of hands. The metal remains smooth and silent. Around it, roads lengthen, mountains open, crowds cheer, laws tremble, and rulers discover that empire can glitter beautifully while always wanting more. You step into a colder kind of brightness. The streets outside are narrow, damp, and half swallowed by mist. Roofs lean toward one another as though exchanging gossip above your head. Rain beads on wool sleeves. Your breath hangs pale in the morning air. Somewhere a bell begins to ring, slow and hollow, sending its sound over muddy lanes, sleeping dogs, and the dark ribs of timber houses. The smell is smoke, wet straw, old stone, horse sweat, and bread just beginning to bake. Gold is here too, but it has changed its manners. It is less eager to glitter in public squares. It withdraws behind walls, into chapels, courts, strong boxes, and locked rooms where keys hang from careful belts. You walk toward a monastery set on a rise above the village. Its outer walls look plain, almost severe. Moss gathers between stones. The wooden gate is cold beneath your palm. Inside, the world softens. Sandaled feet whisper across flagstones. A monk moves through the corridor carrying a lamp, and the flame trembles inside a little cage of horn. You smell beeswax, ink, damp parchment, wool, and the faint medicinal sharpness of herbs drying from rafters. The silence is not empty. It is busy, layered with breath, prayer, scraping pens, and the small coughs of men trying very hard to be holy before breakfast. In this world where he sunned, gold survives by becoming sacred. It is not simply treasure for kings, though kings still love it with predictable enthusiasm. It is worked into chalices, crosses, altar frontals, reliquaries, book covers, and thread for vestments. It catches candlelight during Mass and turns a dim chapel into a pocket of sunrise. You stand near an altar as incense rises in blue-grey ribbons. The air feels warm near the candles and cool near the stone wall. A golden cup is lifted, and everyone's gaze follows. The metal does not need to shout. In a room of whispered Latin and bowed heads, one gleam is enough. A mainstream historical fact rests at the centre of this sacred economy in medieval Europe. Churches and monasteries became major holders of gold, silver, and jewelled objects, partly because rulers and aristocrats donated wealth for salvation, prestige as commemoration, and political alliance. A gift to a church could honour God, polish a family reputation, support prayer for the dead, and remind neighbours who had the resources to be generous in such a wonderfully visible way. It was charity, devotion, memory, and social advertising wearing the same embroidered cloak. You enter the scriptorium where gold becomes almost weightless. The room is pale with winter light, windows are small, and the cold slides through them anyway, because medieval comfort was not exactly a thriving industry. A scribe bends over a page, his fingers stained with ink. Beside him lies a tiny dish of gold leaf. It is so thin that a breath might disturb it. He moistens a prepared surface, lifts the leaf with delicate care, and presses it onto a letter shaped like a doorway into heaven. The page brightens. Blue, red, green, and black surround the gold, but the gold seems to float above them, alive in the flicker of the lamp. Illuminated manuscripts carry gold into the mind. You lean close enough to smell parchment and gum. The page is not merely read, it is approached. A sacred text decorated with gold declares that words can be precious, that devotion can be seen as well as heard. For many people who cannot read, the shine still speaks. It tells them the book is not ordinary. It belongs to a world of saints, angels, law, ritual, and authority. You feel how powerfully an object can shape behavior. People lower their voices around it. Hands become careful. Even the restless child near the doorway pauses, which may be the manuscript's greatest miracle. Then you pass into a treasury, and the atmosphere changes again. Doors are thick, locks are iron, the air smells enclosed like dry wood, metal, dust, wax, and old cloth. Here gold is hidden not because it has lost value, but because value attracts visitors of the inconvenient sort. Reliquaries stand on shelves or within cupboards, shaped like little houses, arms, heads, crosses, or caskets. Some contain fragments believed to belong to saints' bone, cloth, hair, dust from a tomb, or objects touched by holiness. Gold wraps the fragile relic in splendor. The precious container teaches the eye how to honor what it cannot fully verify. Here is a quirky tidbit from the strange cupboard of medieval devotion. Some reliquaries were shaped like the body part they supposedly contained. A saint's arm bone might rest inside a golden arm, raised in blessing. A skull fragment might be housed in a jeweled head. It is oddly practical, deeply symbolic, and just a little startling when imagined in a candlelit room at midnight. Medieval faith had no problem being tender, theatrical, and slightly unnerving all at once. Scholars continue to debate how much ordinary worshippers understood reliquaries as literal containers of holy remains, how much they responded to them as symbols of presence, and how often local communities quietly negotiated belief, pride, and economic interest around a famous relic. The uncertainty is important because relics could transform places. A church with a powerful saint might attract pilgrims, donations, markets, and protection. A golden shrine was not only spiritual beauty, it could become the beating heart of a town's identity and income, which is a very human arrangement: prayer, hope, and souvenir trade walking together under one roof. You join a small group of pilgrims approaching such a shrine. Their cloaks are stiff from road dust and rain. One woman limps, leaning on a stick polished by long use. A man carries a bundle tied with cord. Someone murmurs a prayer. Someone else counts coins with a face of serious concentration. Inside the church, the shrine glows beneath hanging lamps. The smell of bodies, candle smoke, damp wool, and incense gathers under the roof beams. You touch the cold rail before the reliquary and feel generations of hands in the smoothness of the metal. Gold here is not distant. It is touched through barriers, kissed through cloth, approached with pain, gratitude, fear, and requests that sound very much like whispers in the dark. Outside sacred walls, courts cultivate gold with another rhythm. You enter a hall where rushes cover the floor and the fire smokes more than anyone wants to admit. Dogs nose beneath benches. Musicians tune strings. Servants carry dishes smelling of meat, pepper, onions, and wine. A lord sits beneath a hanging cloth, wearing a brooch or belt fitting that flashes when he moves. Gold is ceremonial language at court. It decorates crowns, seals, sword hilts, rings, cups, and gifts exchanged between rulers. It can reward loyalty, mark office, seal marriage, and dazzle ambassadors who are quietly measuring the strength of a household by the shine on display. Yet much medieval gold is unstable in form. A cup can become coins. Coins can become a cross can be stripped in crisis. Treasure is not always a permanent collection. It is a reserve, a statement, and an emergency fund. In difficult times, kings and bishops may pawn, melt, hide, or reassign precious objects. You stand in a chamber where officials weigh plate by lamplight. Their sleeves brush the table. The scale creaks. Wax seals wait nearby. The atmosphere is tense, not dramatic, just practical in the way that money troubles always are. Even sacred gold can become negotiable when armies need paying or walls need repairing. Hidden vaults grow out of this tension. The idea of treasure in the Middle Ages is not only fantasy dragons and heroic riddles, although one can see why dragons were hired by imagination for the role. Real treasure is guarded by monks, stewards, royal clerks, castle officials, and sometimes frightened households who bury valuables when danger rides close. Raids, civil wars, dynastic disputes, and shifting borders make concealment a habit. You kneel in a dim cellar where the floor smells of packed earth and mould. A small chest is lowered into a pit. Cloth muffles the clink inside. Someone covers it carefully, perhaps planning to return soon. Perhaps they never will. Gold hoards found centuries later sometimes carry this silence. Coins and ornaments emerge from fields, riverbanks, foundations, and forgotten corners, holding the final moment of someone's decision to hide value from uncertainty. You feel the sadness in that. A hoard is not only treasure, it may be interrupted life, it may be flight, illness, invasion, imprisonment, or death. The metal survives because it is patient, but patience can be cruel when the owner does not come back. In the Eastern Mediterranean, gold also shines through imperial continuity. Byzantine emperors used ceremony, coinage, mosaics, and sacred art to bind authority to heaven. You stand beneath a dome where tiny pieces of glass and gold tesserae catch lamplight from every angle. The space seems to breathe. Footsteps echo upward. Incense pools in the air. Figures of Christ, saints, and emperors appear not flat but radiant, as if the wall itself has opened into eternity. Gold backgrounds in mosaics do not imitate normal daylight. They create a sacred atmosphere beyond weather, beyond shadow, beyond ordinary geography. It is not a sky. It is a golden nowhere, which somehow feels like everywhere. The Byzantine gold solidaires remained one of the most respected currencies of the medieval world for centuries, admired for reliability and used across long-distance trade and diplomacy. A coin could travel through ports, deserts, courts, and markets, carrying trust in a compact form. But in sacred art, gold travelled differently. It did not invite calculation first. It invited awe. You see how the same metal can become payment in one hand and heaven on a wall. Gold is flexible not only under the hammer, but inside the human imagination. Night settles around the monastery. The bell rings again, lower now, more tired. A monk closes a chest. A candle gutters beside a jewelled cover. Rain taps the roof in soft, uneven patterns. Your hands smell faintly of wax and cold iron from the door latch. In the chapel, the reliquary still glows, though no sunlight remains. Its brightness comes from flame, polish, belief, and all the careful hands that have guarded it. Gold has learned to survive broken kingdoms by hiding in holiness, by becoming memory with a lock, prayer with a surface, and power wrapped in silence. You step into the Sahara at dawn, when the desert is not yet burning, only breathing. The sky is pale violet at the edges, and the sand holds the night's coolness like a secret pressed against your souls. A camel groans nearby, a long, theatrical complaint that makes it sound as if it has personally invented suffering. Leather straps creak. A brass bell gives a dull little chime. Men wrap cloth around their faces, tightening folds against wind, dust, and the sharp glare that will soon rise from every direction. The air smells of dry wool, camel hide, old sweat, dates, ashes, and the faint mineral bite of salt packed in blocks. You are part of a caravan, and the caravan is a moving town. It has its own rhythm, its own authority, its own gossip, its own disasters waiting patiently in the dunes. Camels kneel with irritated dignity as loads are tied into place. Water skins are checked, packs of cloth, Beads, copper, books, grain, and salt are balanced with care. And somewhere among the many burdens, gold waits in quieter forms, dust sealed in small leather pouches, nuggets hidden close to the body, coins carried by merchants whose eyes are calm because panic is bad for business. The Sahara is not an empty barrier. It is a difficult road. That difference matters to someone staring at a map. The desert may seem like a blank space, a great beige warning sign. To the merchants who know its wells, winds, stars, oases, and dangers, it is a network. Harsh, yes, unforgiving, absolutely, but not empty. You feel this as the caravan begins to move. Sand crunches softly under padded feet. Bells answer one another down the line. The lead guide watches the horizon with a seriousness that makes every other thought seem decorative. A mainstream historical fact glows here beneath the dust the medieval West African empires, especially Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai, became deeply connected to trans-Saharan trade in gold, salt, and other goods. Gold from regions south of the Sahara moved north toward North Africa and the Mediterranean world, while salt from desert mines moved south, where it was essential for diet, preservation, and trade. You can imagine the balance. In one direction, the metal that kings desire. In the other, the mineral that bodies need. One shines. One stings the tongue. Both can build power. The sun climbs. Heat spreads over your shoulders and seeps through cloth. Your mouth dries. The world narrows to footsteps, bells, breath, and the next low ridge of sand. The silence of the desert is never pure silence. It is wind dragging grains across the surface. It is the snort of camels. It is the soft slap of water skins against packs. It is a muttered prayer when a strap frays. It is the guide calling a halt near a patch of scrub that looks impossibly modest for something so important. Shade becomes a luxury. Water becomes law. You reach a salt mine in your mind, perhaps at Tagaza, where the ground itself seems to have turned pale and bitter. Blocks of salt are cut and stacked like strange white stone. The smell is dry, sharp, and dusty. Salt powder clings to lips and fingers. Workers live in conditions so severe that travellers described houses and even mosque structures made with salt slabs and camel skin coverings. It sounds like a strange dream, a town built from the thing you put on dinner, except dinner is very far away and everyone is too tired to laugh. Here is a quirky tidbit worth carrying gently in parts of West Africa. Salt could be so precious that slabs of it functioned almost like currency, valued by weight and distance travelled. Imagine buying necessities with a block that slowly tries to season your entire life. Gold, however, comes from greener lands far beyond the driest routes. You move southward in thought, away from salt flats and dunes, towards savannas where grasses ripple under wind and rivers thread through settlement and forest edge. The air changes. It grows thicker, warmer, alive with insects, wood smoke, damp earth, and cooking fires. Gold is gathered from river systems and mining zones, sometimes washed from alluvial deposits, sometimes extracted through local techniques guarded by communities who understand exactly how dangerous outside curiosity can be. The metal is not merely dug up and handed over, it is controlled, taxed, traded, hidden, and protected by custom. The rulers of Mali understood gold's political force. They did not need to mine every grain personally to command its meaning. By controlling trade routes, taxing exchange, and projecting authority across towns and regions, Mali turned movement into power. You enter Niani, often associated with Mali's royal world, and feel the energy of a court shaped by distance. Messengers arrive with dust on their robes. Merchants wait with respectful impatience. Griots, the keepers of memory and praise, speak names that carry weight. Horses stamp in courtyards. Bowls of food smell of grain, sauce, smoke, and pepper. Gold is present, but not always displayed loudly. Sometimes wealth is most impressive when everyone knows it is there without needing to see it piled on the floor like a dragon's bad decorating choice. Then you meet the figure who makes the world look west with widened eyes, Mansa Musa, ruler of Mali in the 14th century. His famous pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 became one of the great golden stories of world history. You join the procession as it moves across Africa toward the holy cities, and the scale feels almost unreal. Camels, attendants, officials, soldiers, scholars, servants, and enslaved people travel in a vast company. The road smells of dust, animals, leather, cooked millet, incense, and hot metal ornaments warmed by the sun. At night, fires bloom under the stars, voices lower, someone recites, someone counts, someone watches the animals with the exhausted devotion of a person who knows one loose camel can ruin an entire philosophy of life. Mansa Musa's journey is remembered because of its extraordinary display of wealth. In Cairo, he became famous for giving and spending gold with such generosity that later accounts claimed he affected local gold values. Whether every detail is exact or embellished, the impression was powerful. You stand in a Cairo street as the Malian procession arrives. The city is dense with sound traders calling, water sellers ringing cups, donkeys braying, mosque voices rising, sandals scraping stone, children darting through alleys. The smell is river air, spices, bread, perfume, animals, and warm dust. Then gold enters the scene not as a whisper, but as a weather event. Mansa Musa gives gifts. He supports the poor. He honours hosts. He buys goods. He behaves as a ruler whose wealth is meant to be seen, admired, and translated into prestige. Gold passes from Malian hands into Egyptian markets, and stories multiply faster than accountants can stay comfortable. You feel the soft pressure of spectacle. This is not only charity, it is diplomacy, devotion, reputation, and royal theatre, all moving under the shade of pilgrimage. He's going to Mecca as a Muslim ruler, but he is also teaching the wider world that Mali is not a distant rumour. It is a power with resources, culture, and reach. Researchers still disagree about how large Mansa Musa's caravan truly was, how much gold he distributed, and how dramatic the economic impact in Cairo actually became. Medieval writers loved impressive numbers, and later retellings loved them even more, because a very wealthy king travelled nicely does not sparkle quite as well as the richest man on earth. Casually destabilised gold prices. The uncertainty does not weaken the story, it makes it more human. What matters is that observers remembered him as almost unimaginably wealthy, and that memory travelled far. That memory found its way into maps. One of the most famous images of Mansa Musa appears on the 14th century Catalan atlas, where he is shown seated, crowned, and holding a golden object. You see him there in imagination, transformed by foreign cartographers into a symbol of African gold. The image is not a neutral photograph, of course. It is European imagination, geography, rumour, trade knowledge, and fascination drawn together in colour. Still, the message is unmistakable beyond the Sahara. It's a king so rich that even distant mapmakers place gold in his hand. You pass into Timbuktu, which grows in memory as a city of trade, scholarship, and manuscripts. The atmosphere is quieter than the caravan road, but not still. Markets hum, scholars debate, students recite, scribes copy texts with careful hands. The smell of ink, leather bindings, dust, grain, and sun-warmed mud brick fills narrow spaces. Gold helps make such centres possible, not by turning every scholar into a jeweller, but by supporting the wealth, patronage, and roots that bring people and books together, under rulers such as Mansa Musa. Building projects and Islamic learning gained prestige. Mosques and schools became part of the landscape of power, yet you also feel the delicacy of this golden system. The route is long, wells matter, its politics matter, and trust matters. A caravan can be threatened by thirst, bandits, storms, illness, or simple miscalculation. Gold's value depends on movement, but movement depends on fragile knowledge passed from guide to guide, merchant to merchant, generation to generation. You run your fingers over a leather pouch and feel the grit caught in its seams. Inside, a little gold dust may represent months of labour and thousands of kilometres of risk. It is small enough to spill. It is valuable enough to change lives. Evening comes to the desert again. The heat lifts slowly from the sand, and the first cool breath of night touches your face. Camels fold their legs beneath them with a heavy sigh. Fires crackle. Tea or broth warms in a pot, carrying a comforting smell through the camp. Above you, the stars appear in impossible numbers, bright enough to make the land feel afloat. The guide studies them with quiet confidence. Somewhere in the darkness, a bell gives one tired note. Gold in this world is not trapped in a vault. It walks by camel, rides in memory, crosses sand, enters markets, funds mosques, attracts storytellers, and pulls distant civilizations into contact. It is river dust and royal reputation, private pouch and public legend. It gleams under the name of Mali, under the shadow of salt blocks, under the patient stars of the Sahara. And as you lie near the dying fire, with sand cooling beneath your blanket and smoke drifting into the deep blue dark, you understand how a metal can make roads across emptiness, and how a desert, if known well enough, can carry an empire's shine. You feel the deck rise beneath your feet before you see land. The ship groans like an old house trying to remember why it agreed to float. Ropes creak overhead, canvas snaps in the wind. Salt spray touches your lips and dries there, bitter and sharp. The air smells of tar, wet wood, unwashed wool, stale water, and fear carefully disguised as confidence. Around you, sailors mutter prayers, curses, and calculations. The horizon is a blue line that refuses to explain itself. Somewhere beyond it, people have begun to imagine gold so intensely that it seems almost visible in the clouds. This is the age of oceanic crossing, when European kingdoms push their ships outward in search of trade route, spices, souls, prestige, and wealth. Gold is not the only desire, but it is the desire that glows best in a king's imagination. It can pay armies, settle debts, reward loyal men, decorate churches, strengthen treasuries, and make a ruler appear chosen by fortune. You stand near a captain who watches the sea with reddened eyes. He speaks of islands, empires, markets, and Christian duty. Yet when a sailor mentions gold, even casually, the whole deck seems to lean closer. A mainstream historical fact anchors this moment after 1492. Spanish expeditions in the Americas pursued precious metals with increasing intensity, and gold became one of the driving forces behind conquest, settlement, and imperial extraction. The first encounters in the Caribbean were shaped by questions about ornaments, nuggets, rivers, mines, and where more could be found. You imagine an island shore where palms clatter softly in the wind and warm rain darkens the sand. The smell is green leaves, smoke, salt water, and unfamiliar flowers. European boots sink into wet ground. Indigenous people watch from a distance, measuring these strangers with metal hats, pale sails, and enormous appetites. At first, gold appears in small things, ornaments worn at the neck, nose, ear, or wrist, little pieces exchanged as gifts, shining objects whose meanings belong to local worlds. The newcomers often see these objects through a narrow tunnel of desire. They ask where the gold comes from. They ask who controls it. They ask again, because apparently repetition is a classic imperial research method. You feel the awkwardness of first contact sharpen into pressure. Gifts become demands. Curiosity becomes command. Misunderstanding becomes policy. The soundscape changes quickly. Waves still break gently on the beach. But now there are shouted orders, barking dogs, axes striking wood, church bells carried across water, and the clink of metal being counted. The smell of fresh-cut timber mixes with sweat, smoke, and damp earth as small forts rise. Gold is searched for in rivers, taken through tribute, demanded from communities, and used to justify further movement inland. The metal that once lay quiet in stream beds now pulls ships, men, weapons, maps, and paperwork across an ocean. You walk into the tense world of the Aztec Empire as Spanish forces under Hernán Cortés entered Tenochtitlan in 1519. The city astonishes you. Causeways cross the lake, canoes slide through canals with soft splashes, markets hum with voices, feathers, cacao, cotton, obsidian blades, flowers, food, and polished goods. The air smells of water, maize, chili, smoke, lake mud, and blossoms. It is not the crude golden fantasy many Europeans had imagined. It is urban, organized, splendid, and alive. Gold exists here, but it does not function in the same way as European coin wealth. It has worked into ornaments, ritual objects, and elite display, often valued with feathers, jade, textiles, cacao, and other prestige goods. You stand inside a palace space where gold pieces catch torchlight beside turquoise, shell, and bright plumage. The Spanish gaze fixes on the metal with almost comic intensity, except the consequences are not comic at all. To them, gold means money, war finance, royal favour, and personal advancement. To their hosts, it may carry status, sacred meaning, craft value, or diplomatic weight. The same object sits between two worlds and speaks two very different languages. A strange tidbit follows these encounters like a whisper. Europeans repeatedly chased rumours of golden places that seemed to move whenever approached. El Dorado began not as a city, but as a story connected to a ruler or ritual involving gold dust among the Misca in present-day Colombia. Over time, the tale grew, wandered, changed costume, and became a golden kingdom, then a golden city, then a fever dream on maps. Gold dust on skin became a continent-sized hallucination. History has many powerful engines, but few are as tireless as a rumour with good lighting. Specialists still debate how much the legend of El Dorado arose from real indigenous rituals, how much came from mistranslation and exaggeration, and how much Europeans reshaped it to excuse deeper expeditions into lands they barely understood. The uncertainty matters because myths can become tools. A story of hidden gold can turn a forest into a target. It can make hardship seem meaningful, cruelty seem profitable, and failure seem like proof that the treasure lies just beyond the next river. You feel that dangerous logic as you walk under a hot, wet canopy where insects whine and leaves drip onto your shoulders. The jungle is nothing like a royal treasury. It is green darkness and living noise. Your boots sink into mud. Vines brush your face. The air smells of rot, flowers, wet bark, and stagnant water. Men sweat through armour and curse the weight of metal meant for battle, now excellent mostly for cooking them from the inside. Birds cry overhead. A mosquito finds your wrist with admirable focus. Somewhere nearby, a guide knows the land far better than the armed strangers pretending to lead. Yet the rumour of gold keeps the company moving, because wanting a thing badly enough can make people impressively unreasonable. You travel then to the Andes, where the air grows thin and cold. Your breath shortens. Stone paths climb through mountains under a sky so clear it feels polished. Llamas pick their way along ledges. The smell is frost, dust, wool, smoke, and high grass crushed under sandals. Here the Inca world holds another vision of precious metal. Gold is associated with the sun, royal power, sacred display, and divine order. It is not minted into coins. It gleams in temples, palaces, vessels, and ornaments, embedded in a system where labour, land, tribute, and state storage matter more than coin markets. When Francisco Pizarro and his men seize Atahualpa in 1532, gold becomes ransom, spectacle, and tragedy. You enter the room at Cajamarca where the captive emperor's fate gathers in silence. The walls feel close. The air is dusty and tense. Atahualpa reportedly offers to fill a room with gold and silver for his release. Objects arrive from across the empire vessels, plaques, figures, ceremonial pieces, works of extraordinary skill and meaning. Then the melting begins. The furnace heat touches your cheeks. Metal softens. Forms collapse. Sacred and royal art becomes bullion, weighed and divided. The sound is terrible in its quietness tools. Murmured numbers, the dull shift of ingots, the scratch of accounting. Not gore, not battlefield thunder, but transformation. A crafted object with a place in a living culture becomes anonymous wealth in an imperial ledger. Gold loses its face. It becomes portable obedience to a distant crown. The room smells of smoke, hot metal, dust, and the sour edge of men waiting for their share. European empires did not rise on gold alone. Silver, especially from places like Potosi, would become even more central to global trade, linking the Americas, Europe, Africa, and Asia. But gold carried the imagination. It appeared in royal reports, letters, promises, maps, and sermons as proof that conquest had divine and economic purpose. You feel this in the paperwork as much as in the mines. Officials write figures, priests write justifications, investors wait for returns, sailors wait for pay, monarchs wait for treasure fleets. The metal moves through systems of forced labour, tribute, disease, alliance, violence, and law. Its shine is never separate from human cost. You stand in a colonial port as treasure is packed for the sea. Barrels roll over planks. Chains clink. Gulls scream above fishy water. The harbour smells of salt, tar, oranges, sweat, and damp rope. Guards watch chests as if staring alone might make theft impossible. Ships wait with open holds, hungry wooden bellies ready for gold, silver, hides, sugar, dyes, and documents. Across the Atlantic, European rulers imagine these cargoes strengthening their states. In the port, dockworkers feel mostly the weight. Pirates and privateers enter the story with a theatrical swagger. History has never quite been able to resist. Treasure fleets attract enemies, storms, and opportunists with hats too confident for their own good. Some attacks succeed, many fail. More treasure is lost to weather than tavern songs prefer to admit. A chest of gold at the bottom of the sea has a certain poetic justice, quietly refusing everyone. You can picture coins scattered among coral, watched by fish with absolutely no interest in monetary policy. Night falls over the harbour. Lanterns flicker in the rigging. The water turns black and restless, tapping against hulls with small, hollow sounds. A chest is sealed. A ledger is closed, somewhere inland. A community mourns objects taken from sacred spaces, taxes demanded beyond endurance, or labour drawn into mines and estates. Somewhere across the ocean, a court prepares to celebrate wealth it did not dig, shape, or fully understand. You hold a small gold piece in your palm and feel how far it has travelled through longing. It has been ornament, clue, ransom, rumour, royal revenue, sailor's dream, pirate bait, and imperial argument. It has made men cross oceans and vanish into forests. It has turned misunderstanding into policy and fantasy into conquest. The metal remains smooth, patient, and strangely innocent beneath your thumb. The obsession around it is not innocent. It is loud with sails, prayers, ledgers, footsteps, and the fevered belief that somewhere, just beyond the known world, the earth is waiting to shine. You step into mud that tries to keep your boot. It grips the sole with a wet, stubborn pull, then releases with a sound like a tired animal sighing. Around you, the camp is waking under a grey morning sky. Canvas tents sag with dew. Smoke crawls low from cooking fires. Someone coughs in a way that suggests breakfast will be mostly coffee, beans, and regret. Picks strike stone in the distance. Shovels scrape gravel. A mule brays with the bitter honesty of a creature that has seen too much human ambition. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, sweat, frying bacon, wet wool, and river water full of silt. You feel cold through your socks because the creek has already claimed your feet as part of its territory. In your hands is a pan, dented and dark, its rim worn smooth by nervous fingers. You kneel at the edge of the water and begin the circular motion everyone says is simple. Swirl, tilt, wash, pause, swirl again. The heavy material settles. The lighter sand slips away. Your wrists ache almost immediately, which is history's gentle reminder that dreams are often repetitive labour wearing a shiny hat. A mainstream historical fact stands here with a bright, familiar spark. The California gold rush began in 1848, when gold was found at Sutter's Mill, and news of the discovery brought hundreds of thousands of people to California, especially in 1849. They came by sea, by wagon, across mountains, deserts, and oceans. They came from the United States, Latin America, Europe, China, Australia, and many other places. The word spread like fire in dry grass. Gold had been found, and ordinary people decided that maybe, just maybe, the earth had finally made a personal exception for them. You lift the pan and watch the muddy water slide away. Your eyes search the dark grit. Every tiny flash makes your heart jump. Most flashes are meeker, wet pebbles, or wishful thinking, which is cruel but efficient. Around you, other miners do the same. Their faces are rough with beard, sunburn, and sleeplessness. One man mutters to himself as if negotiating with the river. Another laughs too loudly when he finds nothing. The sound of the camp is hope being tested by gravel. Gold rush fever is not quiet greed. It is louder and messier, more democratic, and more exhausting. It tells clerks, farmers, sailors, teachers, failed merchants, restless sons, widowers, gamblers, and dreamers that the old rules might be suspended. You do not need noble birth. You do not need a university degree. You do not need permission from a lord in a velvet chair. You need a pan, a claim, strong hands, and a tolerance for discomfort that borders on the heroic or foolish, often both. You walk through a boomtown street where the buildings seem to have been built in a hurry by people who assumed straight walls were a luxury for later. Boards creak under your feet, mud splashes your trousers, signs advertise laundries, hotels, saloons, blacksmiths, bathhouses, assay offices, gambling rooms, and stores selling everything at prices that feel personally insulting. A shovel costs far more here than it did back home. Eggs are treated like precious stones with yolks. Coffee might as well be a controlled substance. The people who reliably profit are often not the miners, but the ones selling tools, food, transport, land, whiskey, laundry, and optimism by the cup. There is a quirky tidbit tucked into this world of mud and fever in some gold rush towns. A fresh egg could become absurdly expensive, and pies, boots, and laundry services sometimes brought steadier wealth than panning. A miner might spend a day finding a few flakes, then hand much of that value to someone who simply washed his shirt. It is not exactly the heroic ballad version, but it is wonderfully human. The person with soap and hot water may outsmart the person chasing destiny in a creek. You enter a saloon at night. The room is warm, smoky, and loud. Lamps burn with a yellow haze, boots thump on rough planks, cards slap table, coins clink. A fiddle scratches out a tune that is almost cheerful if you do not listen too carefully. The smell is whiskey, tobacco, sweat, damp leather, spilled beans, and sawdust. Men who found nothing all day speak as if tomorrow is guaranteed to shine. Men who found something tried to speak normally and fail. A pouch hidden under a shirt changes posture, voice, even friendship. The gold rush creates instant communities, but not gentle ones. Camps need rules before they have courts. Claims must be marked. Disputes must be settled. Theft must be punished. Water rights matter. Tools matter. Boundaries matter. A miner may trust a stranger with a story, but not with a gold pan. Meetings form under trees or beside rough shacks, where men vote on local codes and argue with all the calm dignity of people standing ankle-deep in economic desperation. Law grows in the mud, improvised and uneven. Historians still argue whether the gold rush should be understood mainly as a triumph of opportunity, a disaster of exploitation, an engine of global migration, or a violent acceleration of settler colonialism. The answer depends on whose footsteps you follow. For some, it was a chance to rise beyond old limits. For many indigenous communities, it brought dispossession, disease, violence, and the destruction of land and food systems. For immigrants, it could offer possibility and hostility in the same breath. Gold made the future look open, but it did not open equally for everyone. You feel that tension along the river. The water that carries gold also carries damage. Hillsides are cut, trees fall, gravel beds are torn open. Later, hydraulic mining will blast whole banks apart with pressurized water, sending debris into rivers and farms. The sound is thunderous water roaring through nozzles, earth collapsing, stones grinding, men shouting over the noise. The smell is wet clay and fresh wounds in the land. Gold rush landscapes are not only romantic streams and lucky pans, they are altered valleys, muddy flood channels, and scars that remain long after the last campfire dies. You meet miners from many languages: Spanish, Cantonese, English, French, German, Italian, and indigenous languages move through the air, often rubbing against prejudice, suspicion, and competition. Chinese miners has become an especially significant presence in California and later in other rushes, building communities, working claims, opening businesses, and facing discriminatory taxes and violence. You pass a laundry where steam clouds the windows and wet cloth slaps against wood. Nearby, a cook stirs rice and vegetables over a small fire. The smell is comforting, precise, full of home carried across an ocean. Gold fever spreads far beyond California. In Australia, discoveries in the 1850s draw huge numbers to places such as Victoria and New South Wales. You walk beneath a hot southern sky where eucalyptus leaves release a sharp, clean scent in the heat. Tents and rough huts cover the diggings. Cradles rock gravel back and forth with a wooden clatter. Dust coats faces. In Ballarat, resentment over mining licenses, policing, and political rights helps lead to the Eureka Stockade in 1854, a dramatic clash remembered as part of Australia's democratic story. Gold does not merely make people rich or poor, it makes them argue about authority. Then the chill comes hard in the Klondike. You climb through snow with a load strapped to your back, breath burning in your chest. The world is white, blue, and iron grey. Your fingers sting inside gloves. The air smells of pine resin, frozen sweat, wood smoke, and cold so pure it feels metallic. In 1896, a gold is discovered in the Klondike region of northwestern Canada, and by 1897 and 1898, thousands are pushing toward Dawson City. The journey is punishing. Many carry a year's worth of supplies over mountain passes, because hunger is not a charming frontier accessory. You hear the crunch of boots on ice, the groan of sleds, the snap of frozen rope. At night, men sleep in cabins and tents where breath frosts on blankets. Beans freeze. Beards freeze. Dreams probably freeze a little too. Yet still they come. The Klondike offers the same old promise in a colder accent: endure enough hardship, and the earth may reward you. Dawson becomes a boom town of saloons, dance halls, supply shops, cabins, newspapers, fortunes, frauds, and exhausted people pretending they are not frightened of winter. In every rush, time changes shape. People live by rumour, a strike is reported upriver, and half a camp vanishes by morning. Someone finds a nugget, and the story grows larger each time it crosses a campfire. A claim is worthless at noon, promising by evening, abandoned by the next week. Gold fever makes patience difficult. It turns ordinary caution into something that feels like cowardice. You find yourself listening too closely to strangers. You watch the direction of their eyes. You notice who buys extra flour, who sharpens tools, who leaves before dawn. And then there is luck, that most irritating character in the story. Some hard-working miners find little. Some careless ones stumble onto richness. Some arrive too late and sell sausages instead. Some lose fortunes in gambling rooms or bad investments. Others go home with enough to buy land, start businesses, or tell stories forever. The gold rush loves effort, but it does not reliably reward it. This is part of the fever. If success were predictable, it would be work. Because it is uncertain, it becomes obsession. Near midnight, you return to the creek. The camp is quieted, though not completely, but a dog barks once. A fiddle fades into tired laughter. The water moves over stones with the same soft sound it had in the morning, unconcerned by claims, prices, arguments, or maps. Your hands are cracked from cold grit. Your shoulders ache. In the bottom of your pan, a few yellow grains rest among black sand. They are tiny, almost ridiculous. Yet under lamplight they glow as if they contain every mile walked, every debt risked, every letter home delayed, every foolish hope whispered into canvas darkness. Gold rush fever is the dream that wealth might be waiting in common dirt, close enough to touch if you can bear the mud. It builds towns overnight, empties farms, fills ships, breaks bodies, feeds merchants, destroys valleys, and turns rumour into migration. You lie down on a thin blanket, smelling smoke in your hair and wet earth on your clothes. Outside, someone is already rising to test the creek again. The metal waits without hurry. Human beings provide all the panic. You enter a bank before opening time, when the city outside is only beginning to stir and the marble floor still holds the coolness of night. Your footsteps make a soft echo beneath a ceiling too high for ordinary worries, which is impressive, because ordinary worries have arrived anyway. Clerks move quietly behind polished counters. Ledgers wait in neat stacks. Ink bottles glint under gaslight. Somewhere deeper inside the building, behind iron gates and thick walls, gold bars sit in disciplined silence. They do not sing. They do not glow dramatically. They simply rest there, heavy and persuasive. While paper money, loans, wages, and national confidence lean upon them like sleepy guests at a crowded table, the air smells of leather bindings, dust, lamp oil, cold metal, and the faint sharp scent of ink drying on paper. You run your fingers along a counter worn smooth by thousands of anxious hands. A note is placed in front of you. It is paper, light enough to flutter if the door opens. Yet printed across it is a promise that gives it weight it can be exchanged for gold. That promise is the quiet spell of the gold standard. Money becomes trustworthy because, somewhere, In a vault, the shining metal is supposed to be waiting. A mainstream historical fact stands firmly at the centre of this world during the 19th century. Many major economies adopted the gold standard, and by the late 1800s a broad international system linked currencies to fixed quantities of gold. Britain played a leading role, with gold becoming central to its monetary system, and other countries followed as global trade and finance expanded. The idea seems almost soothing at first. Each currency has a defined relation to gold. Exchange rates become more predictable. Merchants, bankers, and governments can calculate across borders with greater confidence. It is finance trying to put on a clean shirt and behave at dinner. You step outside into a street where commerce is already awake. Hooves clatter over stone. Newspaper boys shout headlines. A tram bell rings through mist. Workers hurry past with lunch tins and tired eyes. Shopkeepers lift shutters. Ships wait in harbours loaded with cotton, grain, machinery, tea, wool, and dreams priced in currencies tied to gold. The gold standard is not merely a vault arrangement. It is a system that stretches across docks, counting houses, ministries, factories, and family kitchens. When it works, it makes money feel solid. When it strains, that solidity can feel like a cage. Inside the bank, a manager turns a key in a lock. The sound is small but ceremonial. You follow him down narrow stairs into cooler air. The walls grow thicker. The smell changes to stone, iron, dust, and the dry stillness of guarded wealth. In the vault, gold bars are stacked with plain seriousness, not like a dragon's pile, sadly, but like something arranged by people who enjoy columns in ledgers. Each bar is less glamorous than legend promised. Dull-edged, stamped, heavy, practical. You place a hand near one and feel no warmth. Gold may run human emotions at a high temperature, but the metal itself remains deeply calm. Under the gold standard, central banks and treasuries must think constantly about reserves. If too many people demand gold for their notes, confidence can tremble. If gold flows out of a country, the money supply may contract. Interest rates may rise to defend reserves. Prices and wages can come under pressure. The system turns the balance of payments into something nearly physical. Gold leaving a country feels like blood leaving a face. Everyone smiles politely, but the room notices. You sit with a clerk who copies figures by lamplight. His pen scratches steadily across paper. Outside, rain taps the window in tiny nervous fingers. Telegraph messages arrive with news of shipments, exchange rates, and financial unease. The world is becoming faster. Information moves in sparks. Capital moves in instructions. Gold moves more slowly, packed, insured, guarded, shipped in boxes that make strong men breathe carefully. Yet the promise depends on all of it matching. Paper says one thing, metal must agree. Markets ask questions. Governments answer with policy, confidence, and occasionally, denial wearing a hat. Here is a quirky tidbit from the polished corridor of monetary history Isaac Newton, better known for gravity. Apples, and making generations of students sigh, also served as Master of the Royal Mint in England. In 1717, his recommendation helped set the value of the gold guinea in relation to silver. The decision unintentionally encouraged Britain's movement toward gold as the dominant monetary metal. So yes, the man famous for explaining why things fall also helped money lean toward gold. History enjoys this sort of neat little joke, then pretends it was accidental. The gold standard carries a moral aura in many minds. It seems disciplined, restrained, adult. Paper money can be printed too freely. People warn. Politicians may be tempted. Debtors may beg for inflation. Voters may demand relief. Gold, by contrast, appears stern and incorruptible. It says no with a beautifully polished face. To its admirers, that is the point. Money should not bend too easily to human weakness. It should be tied to something rare, limited, and outside the whims of ministers. Naturally, ministers have tended to find this insulting, but discipline has a cost. You feel it most clearly in a factory town during a downturn. The sky is low and grey. Smoke hangs over rooftops. Workers gather outside a gate that will not open today. Their coats are thin. Their hands are rough and cold. A child presses close to her mother's skirt. The smell is coal smoke, wet wool, soot, and cheap bread. Somewhere in a capital city, officials defend gold reserves by raising interest rates or limiting money. In the town, the policy arrives as unemployment, falling wages, and a shopkeepers extending credit with tighter faces. This is the human edge of the golden promise. A fixed currency can reassure investors and merchants, but it can also make adjustment painful. If prices must fall, wages may fall slowly or cruelly. If debts stay fixed while incomes shrink, ordinary households feel the squeeze. The gold standard speaks in the language of stability, but not all stability is gentle. Sometimes it is a firm hand on a door that desperate people need opened. Economists and historians still debate how much the classical gold standard truly encouraged global growth and long-term price stability, and how much it exposed societies to harsher crises by limiting governments' ability to respond. The argument remains alive because the evidence has more than one voice. International trade did expand in the late 19th century. Exchange rates were often impressively stable. Yet financial panics still erupted, and gold movements could transmit distress across borders. A system can be elegant on paper and bruising in practice. Anyone who has ever worn formal shoes understands the principle. You move through the late 19th century counting house of an international merchant. Maps hang almost the walls. A globe sits near a window. The desk smells of beeswax and tobacco. Letters arrive from Bombay, London, Buenos Aires, Cape Town, New York, and Shanghai. Bills of exchange, insurance contracts, shipping receipts, and currency conversions fill the day. Gold, often unseen, steadies the calculations. It gives distant traders a common frame. It lets a merchant sleep a little easier, although not too easily, because someone may still lose a cargo to weather, fraud, or a captain with creative judgment. Then war breaks the mood. In 1914, the opening of the First World War shakes the international gold standard. Governments suspend gold convertibility, restrict payments, borrow heavily, and print money to meet wartime needs. You stand in a railway station thick with smoke and shouting. Soldiers lean from carriage windows. Families wave handkerchiefs. Brass bands play too brightly. The smell is coal, oil, wool uniforms, flowers, and fear pressed under patriotic noise. In government offices, the rules that seemed solid begin to bend. Gold remains precious, but survival demands flexibility. War has a rude way of interrupting economic theory. After the war, many leaders yearn to restore the old order. They remember the pre-war gold standard as stable, respectable, almost civilized. Nostalgia is a dangerous accountant. You enter the 1920s, where men in dark suits speak of returning to gold as if returning to a lost moral climate. Some countries restore convertibility at difficult rates. Britain returns to gold in 1925 at the pre-war parity, a decision often criticised for making exports less competitive and deepening pressure on workers. You hear the strain in shipyards and coal districts, where policy feels less like honour and more like hunger. The Great Depression turns that strain into a global reckoning. Banks fail, prices fall, trade contracts, fear spreads through queues, kitchens, markets, and ministries. The gold standard becomes, for many governments, a restraint they can no longer bear. Countries that leave gold earlier often gain more room to lower interest rates, expand money, and begin recovery. Those clinging to gold may preserve credibility in one sense while sacrificing movement in another. You stand outside a shuttered bank with people waiting in cold air, each holding a passbook, each listening for news. The smell is rain, wool, tobacco, and worry. Gold in the vault may be real, but trust outside the door is the thing melting. The dream does not vanish at once. It changes shape. Gold remains in central bank reserves. It appears in international agreements, wartime planning, and post-war monetary design. Under the Bretton Woods system created in the 1940s, the United States dollar is linked to gold for foreign official holders, while other currencies are tied to the dollar. Gold becomes less the everyday promise of banknotes and more the anchor behind an international order. The vault is still there, but the room has grown larger and more complicated. You stand inside a modernizing treasury office where fluorescent light has replaced gas lamps. But anxiety has kept its old chair. Phones ring. Reports pile up. Officials speak of reserves, convertibility, deficits, confidence, and pressure. Gold is no longer jingling in the pockets of ordinary shoppers. It has moved upward into the language of central banks and international settlement. Yet the emotional pull remains familiar. People still ask what money is really worth. They still wonder what stands behind paper, credit, and promises. Gold still offers the comfort of something touchable. By night, the bank closes. The street grows quieter. Rain shines on the pavement like spilled ink. In the vault, bars lie in darkness, indifferent to every theory built around them. You rest your hand against the cold iron door and feel the strange calm of locked metal. The gold standard was a dream of discipline, trust, and order, a belief that money could be steadied by tying it to the earth's rare brightness. It built confidence, shaped empires of finance, constrained governments, comforted creditors, frightened reformers, and sometimes deepened pain when flexibility was needed most. Gold made money feel solid. The trouble was that human life remained fluid. You enter the modern world through a door that looks ordinary. Glass, steel, automatic, humming gently as it opens. The floor beneath your shoes is polished so smooth it reflects the ceiling lights in pale rectangles. Somewhere nearby, an elevator sighs. Phones vibrate. A security camera turns with a tiny mechanical whisper. The air smells faintly of coffee, clean carpet, hand sanitizer, and the cool metallic scent of conditioned air. Gold is here, but it has learned to hide in plain sight. It is not only in necklaces, wedding rings, coins, or vaults. It is inside circuits, behind screens, in satellites, in medical devices, in central bank reserves, and in the quiet, emotional corners where humans still like to keep something shiny against uncertainty. You begin at a jewellery counter because gold still understands the body. Glass cases glow under soft white lamps. Bracelets lie in velvet trays. Chains rest in loops as delicate as sleeping snakes. Rings wait in rows, each one pretending not to know how much drama it may someday witness. You hear the small click of a case being unlocked. The jeweller lifts a band with careful fingers and places it into your palm. It is warm almost at once. Gold has that intimate talent. It stops feeling like an object and begins to feel like a promise. A mainstream historical fact shapes this scene. Gold remains one of the most important materials for jewellery worldwide, and demand for jewellery has long been a major part of the global gold market. In many cultures, gold jewellery is not simply decoration. It is savings, inheritance, wedding wealth, family memory, religious offering, and social signal. You feel this in the weight of a bangle on a wrist, in the clasp of a chain at the neck, in the careful wrapping of a necklace handed from one generation to another. Gold touches skin, but it also touches reputation, duty, affection, and fear. The shop is calm, almost sleepy, yet every piece carries a small storm of labour. Somewhere far from the velvet tray, People and machines have opened rock, processed ore, separated metal, refined it, transported it, melted it, alloyed it, shaped it, polished it, priced it, insured it, and displayed it beneath a light designed to make you forget all that. The necklace looks effortless. This is suspicious. Beautiful things often arrive wearing the invisibility cloak of other people's work. Now you move into a mine, and the air changes brutally and the ceiling lowers. Your boots crunch on grit. Water drips somewhere in the dark with slow, patient taps. Machinery growls through the rock, deep enough to be felt in your ribs. The smell is diesel, wet stones, dust, sweat, and chemical sharpness from processing areas. Modern gold mining can be vast, technical, and expensive, using geological surveys, heavy equipment, blasting, crushing, grinding, and chemical extraction. The metal may end up as a smooth bar in a vault, but it begins as stubborn traces locked inside enormous amounts of earth. You stand beside a haul truck so large its tires rise higher than a person. It moves with a low thunder, carrying ore that may contain only tiny amounts of gold per ton. This is one of modern gold's strange realities. The metal is rare enough that industry must move mountains for modest yield, yet valuable enough that moving mountains can still make sense. Very dramatic behaviour for something that eventually becomes a quiet rectangle in a drawer. The environmental questions are heavy. Open pit mines can reshape landscapes. Tailings need careful management. Water use matters. Chemicals must be controlled. Communities near mines may face promises of jobs and roads, but also risks to land, health, and local ways of life. In some regions, artisanal and small-scale mining provides income for families, yet can involve unsafe conditions and pollution, especially when mercury is used to separate gold. You feel the rough edge of a worker's glove, stiff with dust. You hear the scrape of a pan, the cough of an engine, the murmur of people weighing survival against danger. Researchers continue to debate how best to measure the full social cost of modern gold, especially when comparing large industrial mines, small informal mining, recycling, and consumer demand. The uncertainty does not come from lack of concern. It comes from complexity. Gold can bring income, infrastructure, and national revenue. It can also bring displacement, pollution, smuggling, corruption, and conflict. The same ounce may pass through hands that see it as opportunity, harm, security, beauty, or guilt. Gold never explains itself. People must do the explaining, and people tend to disagree. You step into a refinery where gold becomes clean, standardized, and almost abstract. The room is bright, hot, and controlled. Furnaces breathe heat, workers wear protective gear, molten metal glows orange, then yellow, then settles into bars. The smell is hot equipment, scorched material, and a faint industrial tang. When a bar cools, it looks blunt and plain, stamped with numbers and marks. No crown, no sacred bird, no royal face, just mass, purity, identity. A bar is gold stripped of storytelling, or so it pretends. In truth, even a bar has a biography. It simply keeps it in paperwork. Then you enter a central bank vault. The atmosphere turns colder, quieter, almost theatrical in its refusal to be theatrical. Thick doors, concrete corridors, cameras, guards, fluorescent lights, pallets of gold bars stacked with bureaucratic neatness. You smell dust, metal, old stone, and recirculated air. Each bar is heavy enough to make casual handling a poor life choice. Central banks still hold gold as part of their reserves, not because people expect to buy bread with gold coins on Tuesday morning, but because gold remains a trusted reserve asset in times of uncertainty. It is no longer the everyday anchor of most money, yet it still serves as a form of financial reassurance. There is something almost funny about this. Modern finance runs on electronic entries, credit systems, bond markets, algorithmic trading, central bank policy, and screens full of numbers moving faster than human moods can follow. Yet deep underground, we still keep metal in stacks. The digital world looks weightless. Gold sits there like a grandmother who does not trust online banking and, annoyingly, may have a point. You move from the vault to a laboratory where gold becomes tiny, precise, and useful in ways no ancient ruler could have imagined. The room smells clean, a little sterile, with hints of plastic, warmed electronics, and alcohol wipes. Machines hum softly. Technicians bend over instruments. Gold is an excellent conductor and highly resistant to corrosion, which makes it valuable in electronics. Thin layers and tiny connectors help devices remain reliable. Your phone, computer, and many advanced technologies may contain small amounts of gold, not enough to make you rich by smashing them open. Sadly, please do not begin your treasure hunt with a screwdriver and poor judgment. Gold also appears in medicine and science. It can be used in specialized treatments, diagnostic tools, dentistry, and research involving nanoparticles. In space technology, gold coatings can help reflect radiation and protect equipment. You picture a satellite turning silently above Earth, carrying a whisper of gold through darkness. No temple, no crown, no market stall, just metal doing patient work in orbit, catching sunlight where no one can admire it properly. Gold, apparently, is still willing to serve the sun. Here is a quirky modern tidbit: Olympic gold medals are not made of solid gold. They are mostly silver, covered with a layer of gold. This is sensible, economical, and slightly disappointing to the childlike part of the mind that wants champions to bite into a full golden moon. The bite tradition itself is mostly theatrical now, a photographer's ritual rather than a serious metallurgical test. Still, there is something charming about it. Even in stadiums of LED screens and global broadcasting, we still want to see teeth meet gold, as if authenticity lives in the jaw. Gold's emotional power also thrives in private spaces. You open a small box in a bedroom drawer. Inside is a ring, a chain, a coin, perhaps a pendant wrapped in tissue. The room smells of laundry soap, wood, and a little dust. Outside, traffic murmurs. The object inside the box may not be financially enormous, but it carries a human charge far beyond its market price. It may belong to a wedding, a parent, a migration, a religious ceremony, a childhood memory, or a hard time survived. Gold holds stories because people place stories into it. Its resistance to tarnish makes it a patient keeper. Investment gold is different. Cooler in mood, but still emotional underneath. You sit at a kitchen table with a laptop open, watching prices move in small nervous steps. The screen glows on your face. Rain taps the window. A cup of tea cools beside your hand. People often buy gold when they worry about inflation, currency weakness, war, banking stress, or political instability. Gold pays no interest by itself, grows no harvest, and sends no dividend, which is frankly rather lazy. Yet it offers something many assets cannot: the feeling that value might survive when systems wobble. This feeling can become belief, and belief can become myth. Gold is called safe, timeless, real. Sometimes those words are useful. Sometimes they are too simple. Gold prices can rise and fall. Storage costs exist. Markets can be volatile. Mining can be harmful. Jewelry can be lost. Coins can be stolen. A golden object may carry love, but love and resale value are not identical. A fact many families have discovered during awkward inheritance conversations. Gold is powerful, not magical. It only looks magical because it has spent thousands of years practicing. As evening settles over the city, gold appears in scattered points. A wedding band flashes on a hand holding a train rail. A shop window glows against rain. A tiny connector rests inside a phone in a teenager's pocket. A central bank vault sits locked beneath silent streets. A satellite turns above clouds. A miner washes dust from his arms. A grandmother fastens a necklace in a mirror. The metal links them without asking permission. You step outside and feel the night air cool on your face. Cars pass with a soft hiss on wet pavement. Somewhere, a restaurant door opens, releasing the smell of garlic, steam, and laughter. High above, office windows shine like little squares of amber. Gold has built empires, tempted kings, crossed deserts, funded wars, decorated gods, measured money, and hidden in machines. Yet in your hand, one small ring still feels simple smooth, warm, heavy enough to notice, bright enough to remember. And now the lights grow softer. The city becomes quieter at the edges. The sounds loosen and drift away. One by one the elevators sigh, the footstep, the closing door, the far rain against glass. You hold the image of gold not as hunger, not as conquest, not as a vault or a price, but as a small steady glow resting in darkness. It does not hurry. It does not argue. It simply reflects whatever light remains. Let that light become gentle now, like a candle seen through sleepy eyes, like morning hidden inside the night, like a warm thread laid carefully across centuries. The metal stays behind as you breathe more slowly, and the world grows dim, quiet, and kind.